Okay, so for this video, I wanted to do a walkthrough for Alteryx. How would you set up Alteryx um, as far as uh, pulling in the data and then doing some preliminary queries as well. So for Alteryx, we have our the easiest way for me to find it on my desktop through a Porto was in the data mining folder. It's just a folder of different softwares. And so we have Alteryx Designer, which we'll go ahead and open that. Okay, so that may take a minute to load up there. And so the way Alteryx is designed, you basically have workflows that you can save the steps that you're going to do, that's a nice feature for Alteryx, right? Um, with Access, you can save your queries, but you may not remember, if you don't name them well, you may not remember the steps that you take, or you might not remember the sequence. But the nice thing about Alteryx is it does kind of set up uh, the workflow. So if I go ahead and save this new workflow, I've done this a couple times. Um, Textbook store example. First thing you have to do is you have to bring in data. And so you have these different tools you have options for. And so you could be under a favorites, it could be under in or out. They have different tabs. Either one is fine. It's the same tool. So we can pull in uh, the input data tool, and then we have this menu on the left, and so we use a drop down to connect to a particular file, and then we wait. And I'm going to click on files here. Now if you happen to have the folder open, you could drag and drop it. Now one thing we might try, which I have not tried yet, so this may or may not work, is dragging and dropping multiple files at once. I have a feeling it won't work to do that. And Alteryx says no. So we'll just grab one at a time. So we go ahead and grab the customer. And you can do this, you can do it in terms of the spreadsheets. You could even connect through the database, right? Um, you would just have to select which table, and you just select one table at a time if you want to pull up the database. But these are basically the same data, just in different formats. So you can go ahead and pull that in. If you click refresh, then it'll give you a little preview down at the bottom of the table. Okay, and so we can see that that's set up, and then it'll give me the name. And I'm going to have to do that for every table that I want to bring in. So I'll bring in each of these tables, and these tables are available on Canvas under the, at least when I'm doing this, it's the Auto Analytics. In this case, there's each of these Excel files are available in Canvas, and the database files available as well. Okay, so I'm going to pull in each of these, just double check, make sure that my data looks correct there. And as I click on the workflow, it'll show me the names again. And I'm going to go ahead and expand this to full screen so we maybe can get everything in here and can see it a little better. So I'm going to do this for each of the files. And I'm going to pause the video. You don't have to watch me do all this. You can do it yourself. I'll pause the video while I do this. Okay, and through the magic of technology, it is done. So you should have 5 tables. And again, you could have pulled in a table from the database, and that would have been fine. Could have pulled in all 5 of them from the database if you wanted. I'm just showing you there's different. I'm just telling you there's different ways to do it. Alteryx, one good thing about Alteryx is it's pretty flexible in terms of what kind of data formats it can read. Okay, so the first thing we're looking at here, if we're going to do that same join, if you recall, right? We're trying to do the same join here, where we're going to basically look for this C value. But remember, with Alteryx, they have a direct process to just do a unjoin, a right unjoin. I'm going to show you all three in Alteryx because it's a little bit easier, and then I'll show you how there's differences in those. So again, you can see this under your favorites tab. Pull a join down. There's also a join tab. Either one is fine. And notice how when you get close to an element, it kind of starts to guess, oh, is this what you want to do? And that's fine. Yeah, let's bring the customer to the left. So it's the product now attaches to the right. So now what I have to do though is choose how are we going to join it by. And remember, we're taking the ID from the customer table, and we're not matching it to the ID from the sales table, because that's the wrong ID. Oops, sorry, I did the product table. Let me fix that. Okay, sorry about that. I wasn't looking. We want to join it to the sales table, so that's the one we want. So when I set this up, I don't want ID because that's the sales ID. I want it to match to customer ID in the sales table, right? So ID in the customer table equal to customer ID in the sales table. Okay? If you don't set that up, it's not gonna work, or you're gonna get some really weird results. Okay, so I've got the join. Okay, now what? Well, notice you have an L, a J, and an R here. Okay, and so that is essentially the left unjoin. You see this here, left unjoin. J is that inner join, and R is the right unjoin. And that's what we want. We want that right unjoin because we want to see what is not there. But I'm just going to show you all three. And so the thing with Alteryx, okay, you can run it, and it runs it, but then you're like, okay, what now? We need to set up these browse tools. And there's a browse after for the left, a browse after for the join, and a browse after for the right. I'm going to go ahead and set up all three just so you see the differences on this one. But when you're doing this, you want to decide which one you want. Otherwise, you can get yourself confused. Okay, but let's just take a look. Oh, sorry, I have to run that. And so we click on it after we've run it. And so the left unjoin, basically says there's nothing to display, right? There's 0 records. Remember what that left join was. It was basically saying, are there any situations where we had a customer that didn't have a sales transaction? And the answer is no. All the customers in the table actually had a sales transaction. Makes sense. Now, for a given period, right, you could have customers from prior periods that don't have a sales transaction in this period. It just so happens we didn't have that in this situation. Okay, but you could have something there. If you look at the join, the inner join, right, you're going to basically see all the records, in this case the 7 records, where there's a customer that matches to the customer ID on the sales record. So we basically have, let's see if I move this up, we basically have all the data here, right, for all of these records. So these are matched up. So this is basically that B from the Venn diagram. And then if we look here at the right unjoin, which remember, this is what we wanted. We want to know, are there any sales transactions that don't have a matching customer ID? Okay, and notice I don't have to do any filtering like I had to do for Access or for other database software. It's already done the filtering for me. So this transaction did not have a valid customer ID. All right, so that's what we wanted to know. So now the question is, how much would that revenue be, right? So how much revenue is kind of in question that we're kind of worried about. And for that, we need another join. So if you recall, I'm going to drag that there and just move it. So, and notice I'm only connecting the result of the right join, right? Because I only want at least in this initial case, um, the to know the revenue for this one transaction. So that's why I'm connecting it to this right. But I need to know the details, right? Because from the details, that's going to tell me um, uh, the actual products that were sold. And so there, if you remember, now I'm joining from the sales table. So that's the sales ID to um, the sales ID on that detail table. Okay. And so now, again, I want to, in this case, all I care about is the join browse after. So I want to be able to see the results of it. I add a browse after, right? And then I have to run it. And now I can click and it says, okay, for this one sale transaction, there are actually two products, right? If you look here, product 5 and product 6, and each of those had one quantity, okay? And so now again, if I want to find the value of that, now I have to, I have to bring in another join. And I don't want it on the right, I want it on the J. And now I'm going to pull from the product table. Oops, because remember that product table has the unit price. And so now I'm thinking about, well, how do I join from the detail table, right? How do I join from this over to the product table? Well, it's based on product ID here, and then it'll be based on ID in this table, okay? So when I click on that, my left is the product ID, and the right is just the ID, because that's the product table, okay? And now again, all I care about is that join, so I'm only going to add a browse after for the join. I click my run, and then I can see, okay, I'm just adding more stuff here, right? I'm adding, in this case, I've got unit price of 300 and 150, okay? And if you recall, um, that's what we were trying to get, but we need to summarize it. Okay, so now, right, we're sitting here. We found the unit price, right? We have the quantity. So now we need to extend that, and so we need to bring in some additional elements. We're going to basically create a formula. And so if you see up here in favorites, you got this formula little beaker, right? So I don't want it on the left. There we go. I want it in the middle. I want the join, because that's the piece I'm looking at. So I click on there, and so we're going to add a column. I'm just going to call it extension. So I clicked add, and then I named it. And then I want quantity, which it kind of autofills for me. And I want unit price, which again starts to autofill for me. And this is kind of important. Don't leave it as a VW string, because that is basically like a text type format. So you can pick something else like a double, for example. It's just a data type. Click that, and then I'm going to have to do another browse after. So it's one thing it's a little bit irritating about Alteryx is you kind of constantly have to do these browses if you want to see the results of the steps. Click the run, and so now if I click on that browse, I can scroll all the way over, and I can see my extension, right? Quantity, which is 1 in this case, kind of trivial, times price gives me the extension for both of those. Okay, so then to summarize it, I need to add another tool. So up here I've got the summarize tool. And again, it's as an output here. So I'm going to scroll down, find my extension, click on this add button. So I want to sum it, right? So that's sum of the extension. Again, I have to do a browse after, run it, and then boom, now I've got my extension. okay, of 450. So um, that basically tells me the dollar value of the sale that did not have a valid customer. Okay. Now, another question we might have, and maybe that helps us answer the question around sales, is, well, let's just look and see, well, how much sales is even recorded for the period, right? And so we'd have to do a similar process in the sense of we need to join. In this case, we don't necessarily need the customer table, but we need the sales table joined to the detail table, joined to the product table to get that same information. Okay, so one shortcut might be we could do it for the entire table, or we could do it for all the sales that we think are valid sales, right? Either way, if we can find the total sales and then back out what we think is possibly invalid, or we could just find the parts that are valid, right? But let's say we want to do, let's do the entire thing. And so we need to join. We're going to join the sales table. Notice I can join these tables to multiple joins, right? I'm going to join the sales detail table and do that same process where I'm matching the sales ID to the sales ID in the detail table. Okay, I only care about the join here, right? So I could do a browse, or I don't have to do a browse, right? That's always optional. I'm not going to do it in this case. Oops, I didn't want the left connection. I want the join connection as the left, and then I want to bring in the product as the right. And it'll kind of work its way to try and figure out how to. So maybe what we do is we slide this guy up here. Okay. And so now I've got the, oops, scroll this down here, try and make this a little viewable. So I've got the product table on the right, I've got the sales and sales detail combination on the left, but we're joining on that product ID, right? So we have product ID from the sales and sales detail, and then we have just regular ID on the actual product table. Okay, and so now that's fine. And again, I can do these browse afters, or I can just keep rolling. I'm going to keep rolling, just so I can not make this video 30 minutes long. And so I can do the formula again. Again, setting up a new column, add column. I'm just going to call it extension. I'm going to start typing quantity, and it'll show me quantity. It has to have that format has to have the brackets around each one. Same thing for unit price. So you could type it with the brackets if you wanted to, or you can start typing and select it. Again, I'm going to pick something that's an integer or a numeric, data type. Okay, so that's good to go. And then the last piece was the summarize, right? So I'm going to summarize, in this case, the extension. Click that, add a sum, and then boom. Now I want to go ahead and put a browse after. Oops, yeah, there we go. Click run, and now I can see what do I have, and the answer is $2,775 in revenue. And I know from doing this in Access that is correct, right? That is basically all the revenue that's been recorded for all the sales transactions. We've identified a situation where we think, oh, 450 of that may be questionable, right? So we're kind of able to get to two different questions in a similar process here, okay? And there's different ways you could have done this in terms of sequencing. You could have, if you had the foresight for both of these questions, you could have done a combined piece, right? That basically gets you to about here, and then you could do a filter, right? In which case you'd want to bring in the customer table as well. Do a filter and say, okay, is there a missing customer or not? and then you could have two different sums, right, and answer both of those questions, and that's fine too, right? There's different ways to go about this. All right, so hopefully that was helpful, um, and it'll at least help get you started on Alteryx and make it hopefully a little bit less intimidating for those of you that maybe haven't had a lot of experience with it. All right, thanks.